Neighbors lurking in the dark. Okay, so I've had a few issues with my next door neighbor since I moved in, but nothing creepy until just recently. There is a man, a woman, and at least one boy living there, and I mostly just avoid them. The man seems okay, but a bit weird, and the boy just keeps to himself. The woman is quite a bit off. Crazy encounter. Not long after we moved in, she left a note to my mailbox. Our mailboxes are right beside each other, between our houses. Anyways, I stood at the mailbox reading the note. She thought that my dog was pooping in her yard. It was possible, as our fence has some holes in it. So our dog could have gotten out from there, but those holes had been fixed a long time ago. Still no big deal, except I noticed her standing in her driveway just staring at me. And the note was very long. I kept reading it. The more I read, the crazier it got, and the weirder her behavior in my peripheral vision became. Apparently, I was entitled. She seemed to think I was somehow instructing my dog to poop in her yard. Her note went on a tangent about how awful dogs are. She was also 100% convinced it was my dog, even though there are always tons of loose dogs, cats, and wildlife wandering around and no doubt traveling through her unfenced backyard. In my peripheral vision, she got into her SUV, backed out of her driveway, then parked it along the street directly behind me and just idled there, staring. The note then went on a crazy weird long tirade about the previous family to live in my house, saying I was Anther Deb, as if I've had any idea at all what it was supposed to even mean, then concluded in some odd insults and some implied not-so-quite threats. This was the closest thing we ever had to a conversation at this point. I can understand not wanting a dog pooping in her yard, but this was a bit of an extreme reaction, as this was literally the first time I'd ever even heard of there being a problem. A simple note would have done, but this note was insane. She was still staring behind me. I decided to try to ignore her and just go to my house. That's when she shouted out her window, "Are you playing a game?" That reaction made no sense. "Are you nuts?" I replied, as I officially ran out of patience. She shouted more nonsense and insults at me while blocking my driveway, which was right next to the mailboxes, with her vehicle, while I repeatedly told her to leave before I called the cops. This went on back and forth like that for a while, but she eventually sped off when I pulled my cell out. Later, my boyfriend, who had not been home at the time this happened, had a chat with the neighbors. He said they seemed agreeable and reasonable, and basically dismissed me of just being dramatic. The woman told a very different version of events, of course. I was annoyed that my boyfriend wasn't taking me seriously, but let it go. I think he just wanted to keep getting along with the man next door, as they sometimes borrow tools. They speak to him a lot differently than how they speak to me, and they don't do anything rude to me while he's around. In fact, they don't speak to me when he's around at all. They always wait for him to be away. Creepy encounter. Anyways, I just mostly avoid them. Sometimes the woman stares at me, but I just ignore her. Until recently, I have been mostly successful. Now, here's the creepy story. I don't sleep well at night when I'm home alone, and I'm always home alone now, because my boyfriend is out of country on business for months at a time. I often felt like there's someone just outside my door or at my house. Sometimes, my dogs act up at odd hours, but I never seen anyone before. I keep my house alarm armed and pistol in my nightstand. The other night was one such night. I didn't sleep well, and I kept having a sinking feeling that something was wrong. Anyways, I got out of bed at about 2 a.m. because I thought I was scheduled to work at 3 a.m. I had mostly given up on getting a restful sleep then anyways. As I left my house, I heard something to my left, the direction of my neighbor's house, but didn't see anything. I was always nervous in my driveway because the motion sensor light was broken. There was always a lot of darkness between my door and my truck, just a lot of the darkness. So I always moved quickly in my driveway. I got inside my truck and went to work. It turned out that I misread my schedule and didn't work at 3 that morning after all. Annoyed at the mistake, but grateful I get to go home and sleep a little bit more Before my actual start of my shift at 7, I went home. I pulled into my driveway and didn't see anything in the beam of my truck's headlights. I always look around my truck before getting out. I turned the headlight off and got out. I took a few steps ahead of my truck. Then all of a sudden, a large man called out to me, shouted really, from the shadow at the corner of my house. He scared the living crap out of me so bad that I screamed, reached for my pepper spray, and fell down. He apologized in a tone that didn't sound sorry at all. It was my neighbor, and that wasn't much of a relief. Apparently, it was my fault that he occasionally found trash in his yard in windy Colorado. Complaining about this seemed to be a lot more important issue than scaring the hell out of a woman alone at night. He showed no real concern or realization that was even wrong at all. Again, I have no problem with the neighbors bringing issues to my attention, but seriously? Hey, can you make sure trash from your bins isn't blowing into my yard? Is not a statement that takes 10 frickin' minutes, nor is it one that needs to be addressed at 3 in the frickin' morning. I nod in agreement to keep the peace, but I know the trash isn't mine. We live in a windy area. Trash gets blown around in people's yards all the time. It's no big deal. But he just would not stop going on about it. He kept needlessly repeating himself, and made some not quite but kind of threat about getting along. He was keeping me busy. I didn't even notice his wife flank me. Before I even knew she was there, she appeared from the shadows by a tree. She wanted to yell at me about some eggs. A few weeks ago, I basically found a bunch of eggs smashed on the road near our shared mailbox. As the carton was right next to them, I thought the carton had obviously been dropped, not that someone was trying to egg anything. I assumed my neighbor had dropped the eggs on her way to get the mail and just left them there. But I didn't care enough to say anything to her about it at the time, so I just basically forgot about all of it. Now, she was accusing me of leaving eggs around, again, expressing their grievance at 3 a.m. in the morning. Weird that she even brought it up weeks ago when it happened, but I don't know why she didn't. My boyfriend was still here then. My boyfriend had been away on business for several weeks now, long enough for them to have noticed his absence. They were also probably aware that my motion sensor light was out. They sure seemed to know how to avoid my headlight beams. Sure, it could be a coincidence, but did I mention that this was all at 3 a.m.? Not some other dark yet reasonable for a person to be outside hour? Being surprisingly patient, I explained that I knew nothing about the eggs. I mentioned that I later found a lot of the shells in my yard and figured a squirrel must have carried them there. She proudly informed me that she tossed them onto my yard herself. Apparently, she thought that was okay, but someone dropping them in the first place isn't. Anyways, this is when I started to get over my shock and started getting pissed. Initially, I had been somewhat relieved that the man in the shadows had been my neighbor, not some random crazy person, but now I was pissed. I had now been outside with them for like 20 minutes, while they accosted me about stupid crap, while I tried to be polite and agreeable, even though I had nothing to do with it. But now everything wrong with the situation had kicked in. I eventually remembered that I don't actually have to put up with any of this, and cut her off mid-rant and said, "It's 3 a.m. I'm going home, good night," and turned on my heel. I heard her say something in an unkind tone as I left, but didn't catch what it was. They had staked out my house, waited for my boyfriend to leave, and long enough to be sure he was gone, all to complain about some inane crap long after it supposedly even happened. I mean, if they have concerns, surely there are better times to address them than at 3 a.m. Why the hell were they out doing at 3 a.m. anyways? And that man had totally, purposefully hid in the shadow at the corner of my house, where he could avoid my headlights, and didn't reveal himself until I was out of my truck and exposed? And shouldn't the woman have walked up beside her husband, not gone around while I was distracted? They keep doing odd behavior, never enough that they're doing anything illegal or anything to report to the police. But none of this is normal behavior. Honestly, I think these complaints are just excuses, and they're really just taking the opportunity to intimidate me. I think they're messing with me on purpose. Then again, I could be wrong. They could be just weird and incredibly socially inept, but otherwise harmless. Either way, I will be installing a motion light soon. I was so shaken up and had my adrenaline so high from someone scaring me from a blind spot by my house, because seriously, that could have been someone else and a lot worse, that I didn't really get any sleep before work. Neighbors lurking in the dark again. Since then, they've ramped up their aggression. Right out of the Harassing Neighbors handbook, they started wasting police time, calling in fake noise complaints or reporting my dogs as unlicensed and unvaccinated. To be fair, I've been puppy sitting a friend's dog who would occasionally yap at a squirrel, upon which I'd immediately let him in. But that dog had been gone for some time now. Once while letting the dog in at the first bark, the man stuck his head out the window to scream at me to bring the dog outside, something I was obviously already doing, and then he kept screaming, and screaming, and screaming. Hilariously, as he was screaming, he called 7 a.m. an ungodly hour. 7 a.m. is past city noise ordinance hours. If his goals were quiet, he failed. But I suspect his goal wasn't to be quiet. He just wanted an excuse. I simply asked him, "Is this how adults behave?" and went inside. This was the last time I ever said a word to either of them. I can't prove it, but I'm pretty sure he watches me from my window whenever I'm outside, just looking for any excuse to scream and hurl insults. Recently, I've been outside with my dogs whenever they're outside. I know for a fact that they haven't made a single peep. And yet, I still get aggression from them. It's only me, 4'11" female, they bother. They never say a word to my boyfriend, nor anything to me when he's around. Once while I was getting mail, the woman saw me out her window, left her house, and started stomping towards me. I braced myself for some abuse. She then noticed my boyfriend was waiting in the car next to me, stopped dead, and pretended to get her mail. My boyfriend leaves country now and then for work, and it seems my neighbors are watching. They usually wait a few days to be sure he's gone. What makes me right today is that they've even stopped bothering to make excuses up. They've apparently learned my schedule, and now wait for me at night quite regularly. More than once I've caught them lurking in the dark. Sometimes I'll be putting out the trash at night, only to see the woman stalking towards me out of the darkness. When I see her coming towards me, I abandon my task and go back inside and wait for her to leave. Last night, when I arrived home, the man was waiting for me in the dark. I never saw him, but I heard him. As soon as I got out of my car, he shouted like he was talking to someone else. "My neighbor Helen is a..." And then what followed was a string of insults that continued until I got back into my house. I don't know where he was in the darkness, or if there was actually someone with him. There are enough lights outside that he would have to deliberately avoid them to be unseen. You know that thing little kids do when someone they don't like is around? When they suddenly turn to their friend and start trash-talking that person, as if they've been doing that all along, and the unliked kid isn't even there, but do it loudly enough to be heard? Yeah, it's like that. I only heard his voice. I'm not sure if there was really a second person in the dark with him, or if he was alone and just pretending to talk to someone else. I'm not sure which is creepier. When I went back inside, I grabbed my pepper spray and then stepped back outside with my phone, ready to record, but it seems he was gone. To me, this means he really just was lurking outside, just to wait for me. I should say that I've not spoken a single word to these people since the last time I wrote here. I have no idea what their problem is. Seriously, the last time I had anything to do with either of them at all was earlier this week when I heard a car stuck in the snow on the then unplowed road in front of my house, and stepped outside to push the stranger's car free. The neighbor woman happened to come outside during this. I never said a word to her as we pushed the car free. They don't even seem to be looking for excuses or making things up to complain about anymore. Now just lurking around outside in the dark to just harass me. I'm documenting all of this and plan to get a restraining order or something as soon as I can get some proof. I'm definitely getting a security camera as soon as I can afford one. Last week, the front tire in my truck on the side their house is on. It got a flat right before a big blizzard hit. I ended up having to replace the front 2 tires. Now, these tires were needing replaced anyways, and I couldn't see any obvious puncture in the flat one, but a part of me wonders if it really was just a coincidence. It would be an easy target for neighbors lurking in the dark between houses. I've started sleeping with my pistol on my nightstand again. Neighbors lurking in the dark 3. After a short period of calm, my neighbors have gone back to lurking in the dark when I get home and screaming abuse. Last time the cops couldn't do anything, but this time I got it on video. The man even repeated my name after he noticed I was recording. The police came quick and are talking to them now. I'll add updates within the hour, and the video as soon as I can censor my name. Edit. Okay. Here's the story. Apparently the lady next door, whose episodes I've written about before, has somehow become convinced that her husband is cheating with me. Apparently, there are certain people out there who love slinging random accusations around. Seriously, I don't even know this guy's name and struggle to even describe him to the police. And this man's way of disproving the accusations, waiting for me to come home and shouting insults about me while alternating between loud, worshipping his wife's beauty very loudly, and also calling her a bitch at the same friggin' time. Anyways, got home at a little after 11 p.m. and was taking out my trash when the wife shouted at me, "You're playing a game!" which she has done before when she wanted to cause trouble. That's when I started recording. From that point, it was mostly the man yelling. They've done this a few times since my last update, and were even bold enough to do it during the day, but they didn't say my name then, and the audio quality was poor, so I didn't do anything with it. And things had calmed down recently, so I thought they were done. And tonight, they stirred up again. When I pulled my phone out, the wife was taunting me, saying something like, "Yeah, start recording, bitch," which I'm not sure if I got on a video or not. The wife also told me that I need to move out of my house. And as for the man, it was mostly just a string of the typical boring insults that he has done before. Now, how I'm an ugly psycho cunt and so on and so forth. And I didn't even say a single word to them, not one. They went inside after I put the phone to my ear, suddenly not so bold anymore when they realized I was on the phone with the friggin' police. So the police came, watched my videos, and talked to the both of them. When the police returned, they said that the couple was still being belligerent when they were there, and that the couple was shocked that they could actually be arrested for this type of behavior. The neighbors tried to turn it into a complaint about my dogs, but the police weren't having it. Before the police arrived, they read the report of the previous officers that came out, so they knew these people only acted up when my boyfriend wasn't around. So they claim my dogs acted differently when my boyfriend is around somehow. Anyways, it didn't work and it didn't add up. As for the videos, I'm trying to post them, but I'll do it later, I guess. Small updates. I talked to the people at my work. I told them that if I ever don't show up for a shift and can't be reached by the phone, the police are to be called to my house immediately. Both my supervisor and manager now want me to check in with them by text on my days off. My supervisor will be escorting me home and will like to show up at my house periodically, just to let the neighbors know someone is around.